Imagine you are a British commander in 1781. You have over 1,000 of the best trained soldiers on earth at your back. Your enemy, a ragged group of farmers, shopkeepers, and part-time soldiers, half of them untrained militia, with a reputation for dropping their weapons and running at the first sight of a bayonet. You have crushed them before. You will crush them again. You ride forward. You see the Americans deployed on open ground, a river cutting off any retreat behind them. Trapped, outnumbered, nowhere to run. You smile. This is not a battle. This is a slaughter. And that thought, that absolute certainty of victory, is exactly what destroys you. Within 60 minutes, over 80% of your force will be gone, roughly 300 killed or wounded, and nearly 600 more taken prisoner. And the man who did it to you had never attended a single day of military school in his life. So how does a backwoods general with no formal training design a trap so perfect that one of history's greatest armies walks straight into it and never realizes it until the walls close in? South Carolina, late 1780. The American Revolution is dying. The British had captured Charleston in May, taking over 5,000 Continental soldiers prisoner, the single worst American defeat of the entire war. British commander Lord Cornwallis controlled most of the southern colonies. Loyalist militias were terrorizing patriot families across the countryside. Farms were burned. People were executed without trial. The revolution, by every reasonable measure, was on the verge of total collapse. General Washington sent Greene south to take command of whatever was left of the American army down there. What Greene found when he arrived was barely an army at all. Roughly 1,400 starving, poorly equipped men scattered across the Carolina backcountry. And then Greene made a decision that his own officers called insane. He split his already tiny force in two. He sent 600 troops west, deep into British-controlled territory under a general named Daniel Morgan, a man who had every reason to hate the British, and a man who understood something about warfare that no textbook had ever taught. Daniel Morgan was not your typical general. No wealthy family, no aristocratic connections, no formal education. He had grown up poor in Virginia, working as a laborer hauling supplies through the wilderness. During the French and Indian War, he punched a British officer who insulted him. The punishment? 500 lashes across his bare back. The scars stayed with him for the rest of his life. Morgan reportedly joked that the British still owed him 1 lash because the drummer had miscounted. That is the kind of man Daniel Morgan was, and that is why he was the right man for what was about to happen. Now, before we go further, history deserves honesty. Morgan had advantages that textbooks often skip. The terrain at Cowpens favored his 3-line formation. Tarleton's troops were exhausted from an 8-mile night march with barely any food or sleep. And there were moments in the battle where timing and luck played a role as much as any plan. Morgan did not conjure a miracle from nothing. But here's what separates him from every other commander who had those same raw ingredients and still lost. He was the only one who looked at his militia, accepted exactly what they were capable of, and built his entire strategy around that reality, instead of wishing it away. We are taught that great victories require superior training, superior weapons, superior numbers, that professional armies beat amateur ones, that the side with better equipment wins. Morgan was about to prove that the most dangerous advantage on any battlefield is not strength. It is clarity about your own forces, your own limits, and your enemy's blind spots. Morgan had fought alongside militia at Saratoga. He had watched them perform brilliantly from the tree line, picking off British officers with long rifles. But he had also watched them collapse completely at Camden, where a British bayonet charge sent over 2,000 Americans running in minutes. And Morgan reached a conclusion that most Continental officers refused to accept. The militia were not cowards. They were untrained civilians carrying muskets. asking them to stand in an open field and trade volleys with British regulars, men who had drilled for years, who had fought across 3 continents, was like asking a high school football team to hold the line against professional players. It was not a question of courage, it was a question of capability. And that honest assessment, that refusal to pretend his men were something they were not, became the foundation of the most perfectly executed trap in American military history. Morgan did not try to fix his militia's weakness, he turned it into a weapon. When Morgan learned that British cavalry commander Banastre Tarleton was chasing him with over 1,000 soldiers, he stopped at a place called Cowpens, a wide cattle pasture in northern South Carolina. His officers were confused. The position looked terrible. Open ground stretched in every direction. A broad river sat 5 miles behind them, cutting off any retreat. Morgan chose it on purpose. He knew that if his militia had an escape route, they would use it. By putting a river at their backs, he removed the choice entirely: fight or drown. But Morgan was not asking them to die. He was asking them to do something very specific, very simple, and very temporary. He spent the entire night before the battle walking from campfire to campfire, personally. He crouched down with groups of shivering militiamen, told them jokes, shared stories about fighting the British, and calmly explained exactly what he needed from each man. He told the militia they would not face a bayonet charge. They would fire 2 shots, then they would walk away with honor. 2 shots, that was all. Now picture the battlefield from above. 3 lines, each set about 150 yards apart. First line, 150 sharpshooters, frontier marksmen who could hit a target at 250 yards. Their job, shoot the officers, target anyone on horseback, anyone giving orders, then fall back. Second line, 300 militia under Andrew Pickens. Their job? Fire 2 volleys when the British come within 50 yards, then turn left, circle behind the third line, and reform in the rear. 2 shots, leave, done. Third line, 450 Continental regulars, the experienced fighters, trained, disciplined, ready. They would hold the center. And hidden completely out of sight behind the far hill, 80 cavalry, the killing blow that nobody would see coming. Every man on that field knew exactly what to do. Every move had been rehearsed. Morgan had turned a desperate defensive position into a precision machine. Now all he needed was for Tarleton to do what Tarleton always did. Banastre Tarleton was 26 years old, aggressive to the point of recklessness, and carried a reputation as the most feared British cavalry commander in the colonies. At the Battle of Waxhaws the year before, his dragoons had cut down surrendering American soldiers, earning him the nickname Bloody Tarleton. He didn't believe in caution. He believed in speed, shock, and the bayonet. And every single encounter with American militia confirmed his worldview. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and they break. On the night before Cowpens, Tarleton pushed his troops through pitch darkness, across swollen creeks, muddy cattle trails, 8 miles before dawn. His men had barely eaten, many had not slept. Horses were stumbling, soldiers were dragging their feet through frozen mud. And then his scouts reported Morgan's position. Americans on open ground, river behind them, no escape route. Tarleton saw exactly what Morgan wanted him to see, a trapped, desperate enemy with nowhere to run. He did not wait for his men to rest. He did not conduct reconnaissance. He did not hold a meaningful reserve. He ordered an immediate attack. Because Tarleton had spent his entire career being rewarded for aggression, every instinct he had told him this was the moment to strike. His greed for a quick, humiliating victory over the rebels overrode every tactical principle he had ever been taught. He was charging straight into the most carefully designed trap in the entire war, and he thought he was about to win. The British advance swept across the frozen pasture at first light. The first thing they encountered was the skirmisher line, and immediately British officers started falling from their horses. A captain dropped, then a sergeant. The riflemen fired, reloaded, fired again, and then melted backward exactly as planned. The British pressed forward. They could see the militia line ahead, rough-looking men in civilian clothes. This was the moment British regulars trained for, the charge against undisciplined colonials who would break and run. The drums beat, the redcoats leveled their bayonets, they surged forward with a shout. At 50 yards, Pickens gave the order. 300 muskets fired simultaneously into the British ranks. The volley was devastating. Entire sections of the British line crumpled. Men dropped in rows. Before the smoke even cleared, the militia reloaded and fired a second volley into the staggering formation. Then, exactly as Morgan had told them, they turned and began moving to the left. And this is where Tarleton made the fatal mistake Morgan had been counting on. When the British saw the militia turning and moving away, they believed it was a rout. The Americans were running. This was Camden all over again. Officers screamed for the pursuit. British discipline dissolved into a full-speed charge. Soldiers sprinting uphill, bayonets forward, screaming, certain the fight was already won. They crested the hill and ran directly into Howard's Continental Line. Fresh troops, rested, standing shoulder to shoulder, muskets loaded and aimed. At nearly point-blank range, Howard gave the order to fire. The volley hit the disorganized British charge like a wall. Before the survivors could process what had happened, Howard ordered a bayonet charge, American regulars slamming into stunned redcoats at close quarters. And at that exact moment, Washington's cavalry thundered out from behind the hill, 80 dragoons at full gallop, sabers swinging, crashing into the exposed British right flank. The British line buckled. Then came the final piece. Pickens, the militia, had marched around the back of the Continental Line exactly as planned. They reappeared on the opposite side of the field, reformed, advancing with loaded muskets. The British were being hit from the front, from the right, from the left, a perfect encirclement, executed by farmers, shopkeepers, and backwoods riflemen against one of the most professional armies on earth. British soldiers who had been sprinting forward in triumph just minutes earlier now found themselves surrounded on three sides. The army broke, not slowly, it shattered. Soldiers threw down their muskets and raised their hands. Officers tried to rally resistance. They were cut down or surrounded within minutes. The battle lasted roughly 1 hour. In that time, Morgan's force killed or wounded over 300 British soldiers and captured nearly 600 more, including entire artillery crews and their cannons. Tarleton lost over 80% of his command. American losses: 12 dead, 60 wounded. Those numbers are almost too extreme to believe. Military historians double-check them because they barely seem possible. But here is what makes Cowpens truly remarkable. It is not just that Morgan won, it is how he won. He took the greatest weakness of his army, the unreliability of militia under direct assault, and turned it into the centerpiece of his trap. He used their retreat as bait. He made the British believe they were winning at the exact moment they were losing. Every line, every movement, every withdrawal, choreographed to pull the British deeper into a kill zone they never recognized until it closed around them. Morgan did not fight the battle the British expected. He designed a battle the British could not resist, and then let their own aggression destroy them. This is the genius trap that the title promised you. The British were not stupid. Tarleton was not incompetent. He was a decorated, experienced, feared commander, and he still lost. Not because Morgan was flawless, but because Morgan saw the battlefield for what it actually was, while Tarleton saw only what he expected to see. That gap between reality and expectation was the real kill zone. 2,000 years before Cowpens, Hannibal did something remarkably similar at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC. allowing his center to bend inward while his flanks closed around the Roman legions. Military scholars have drawn the comparison for centuries. But Hannibal had veteran Carthaginian soldiers who had trained for years. Morgan did it with men who had been farming corn 6 weeks earlier on a cattle field against an opponent who should have known better. The lesson of Cowpens is not really about the American Revolution. It is about how the most dangerous traps in history are never the ones you can see. They're the ones built out of your own confidence, your own assumptions, your own certainty that you already know how this ends. Tarleton thought he was chasing a desperate, broken enemy. He was actually being guided, step by step, exactly where Morgan needed him to go. The terrifying part, he felt like he was winning the entire time. That is the genius trap, and it works just as well in boardrooms and courtrooms and negotiations as it did on a frozen field in South Carolina in 1781. The ground at Cowpens is quiet now. A national battlefield park marks where each line stood, where the cavalry charged, where the British shattered. The rolling pasture looks almost exactly as it did that January morning in 1781. Green grass, gentle hills, open sky. Easy to forget that for 60 minutes on a freezing January morning, this ordinary cattle field hosted one of the most perfectly executed military deceptions in human history. If this kind of breakdown is your thing, subscribe. There are battles ahead that make Cowpens look simple.